Hello, I'm Mike Young. This is a report on a confrontation analysis workshop I held on the 9th of July. Well, what's confrontation analysis? It's a way to understand politics, a method to help you plan politics, and a method to help you focus on the points of leverage in politics. We don't use it at the moment when looking at political moves. Instead, we tend to use unstructured methods, usually sitting around a table listening to experts' views, even though they often disagree with one another. And that's despite the fact that there's lots of evidence that says that just relying on judgment is not much better than random chance. When these people invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, they weren't short of experts to advise them. But with the benefit of hindsight, do we think they fully understood the political implications of what they were doing? Perhaps we should go back to 1995 to find a successful example of a large-scale intervention, British General Rupert Smith's operations in Bosnia. Rupert Smith did not shy away from telling us how he worked. After the war, he wrote the book The Utility of Force. He also worked with the late Professor Nigel Howard to mathematically formalize his thoughts. This was expressed in the theory of confrontation analysis. It's Nigel Howard's work, which, since his death, I've refined and developed and will illustrate in this video. So, how do you do confrontation analysis? Well, firstly, we want to look at who's involved in the decision we're interested in. Then, find out people's positions, what they're saying they want to have happen. This is easy. You ask them. Sometimes you have to listen for hints a bit, but in general you can get this. It's declared and in the open. Doesn't require knowing anyone's motivations or access to classified data. Just what they are saying. Third step is to find out what they will do if no better agreement can be made and nobody budges from their position. That's called the threatened future. It's what are people threatening or promising to do, and, more importantly, who believes them. So let's look at how we did that in the workshop, where we looked at the politics of the Middle Eastern country of Bahrain. Right, first step, who's involved? These are the four sides we represented. Firstly, the Bahrain government, based around the Al Khalifa family, the king, his son, the crown prince, and his uncle, who's prime minister. They, like 40% of the population, are Sunni Arabs and hold a lot of the political power. Secondly, the Shia, represented by the Al-Wafaq political party and their Iranian allies. The Shia are a majority of the population, but they think the king is discriminating against them and being undemocratic, something the king denies. They have, against the wishes of the king, been publishing bitter, divisive stories which the king thinks is irresponsibly stirring up hatred. Thirdly, Bahrain's powerful neighbour, the Sunnis, and the extreme Sunnis, the Salafists. They think the king should be tougher on the Shia, but they definitely don't want disorder in Bahrain, as that would affect Saudi economically, and any unrest would easily spill over. Fourthly, the Western media, and they're on the lookout for a good story. They tend to support the Shia as the underdog, who have been denied their democratic rights, but they're a bit worried that instability may result in far too much Iranian influence. So those are the parties involved. What are they saying they want to have happen? Let's look at that in detail. First of all, the Bahrain government could discriminate against the Shia. What we do is we put the positions of the parties down. We build up a table like this. Each of the participants has a position, what they think will happen. ought to happen. So, should the Bahrain government discriminate against the Shia? No, say Al-Wafaq. Ask the Bahrain government, are you discriminating against the Shia? And they say, no, we're not. Now, the other two parties aren't really that interested. So that's our positions. Our next step is the threatened future. What will they do if nobody budges? We put that on the left-hand side of the table. And the Bahrain government is saying that it's not discriminating against the Shia and it's not going to in the future. So put a cross there. But remember, we also said, do others actually believe them? And Al-Wafaq does not. So we show that by putting a question mark there. Now that is a problem. Al-Wafaq think the government is lying. They think this cross is actually a tick, and that is a dilemma for Al-Wafaq. Al-Wafaq don't trust the Bahrain government, so this is actually what's known as a trust dilemma. Here's the problem copied into my Dilemma Explorer program. As you can see on the right hand side there are 5 extra columns. These 5 columns represent the 5 dilemmas that it's possible to have. All the problems anyone can have will be one of these 5 dilemmas. At the moment the columns are blank. That's because this row has everyone in agreement about the outcome. That is, everyone agrees that the king should not discriminate or doesn't care about it. But we forgot that doubt. Al-Wafaq doesn't believe this. It thinks the king's lying. Put that in and the computer will register the dilemma. It knows what dilemmas there are because what dilemmas there are follow from the structure. And when you have one of these dilemmas, your mind is concentrated on finding ways to get rid of them. But there are a selection of ways, and the software will show you which ways you can use when you click on it. So press pause if you want to read this in more detail. These are the 4 strategies that Al-Wafaq could take to remove its trust dilemma. But that's not the only problem. There's other ones as well. Al-Wafaq is publishing these anti-government stories. Now Al-Wafaq says, yes, I want to do it, but the Bahrain government says, I don't want you to do it. Don't want you to do it either, say the Saudis. And in the future, what's going to happen if nothing changes? Al-Wafaq is going to carry on publishing them in defiance of the Bahrain government. So that gives a different dilemma, a persuasion dilemma. Al-Wafaq is defying the Bahrain government, and the Bahrain government needs to persuade Al-Wafaq not to do it. Click on these bars and you'll be able to see the details of what the Bahrain government could do to overcome this dilemma. Press pause if you want to read them in more detail. But the Bahrain government has another problem. The Western press has picked up on this and is publishing the same stories. And the Bahrain government is getting bad press in the world because of this. And that's going to carry on happening, giving the Bahrain government another dilemma. So the Bahrain government tries to put its point of view to the Western press. It says, Western press, will you publish our point of view, please? But the Western press says, not really. It's not really doing it. So more and more dilemmas appear. What could the Bahrain government do about it? Well, here's what the Bahrain government has tried. Look at this dilemma. Let's try and get rid of this dilemma of Al-Wafaq publishing the anti-government stories. There are 6 ways you can get rid of a dilemma. Press pause if you want to read them in more detail. But What the Bahrain government chose was method B, to introduce a threat to deter al-Wafaq. Could you make it awful for the Shia to actually publish those anti-government stories? Or could you do E? Could you make them unable to publish the anti-government stories? So what they did was they took the most virulently anti-government things. In this case, it was people who'd been tweeting against the king, and they shoved them in jail. Don't do that, said al-Wafaq. Don't do that, said the Western press. They got dilemmas. They don't want it to happen. But this action, it was caused by the Bahrain government because they wanted to stop this happening. Were they successful? Did the tweets stop? No. The tweets continued even when the anti-king tweeters were in jail. And of course, the jailed people, their tweet scores increased immensely. They became the most popular tweeters in the country. So it wasn't really effective at dealing with this main problem. Saudis also wanted this to happen. So this was the current political situation at the time of the workshop. We then asked the participants what they would do and gave them a chance to develop the politics themselves. This is what happened. Well, the Bahrain government looked at its dilemmas and also looked at the ones the Western press had. The Western press was concerned about the jailing of the tweeters, but the Bahrain government was concerned about the fact the Western press wasn't publicising what it thought. So what it decided to do was to make a release of the tweeters and make the Western press get a lot of credit for it, because then the award ceremonies and things could give good publicity to the Bahrain government. So what happened was the Bahrain government showed the Western press was influential in releasing the tweeters, released the tweeters, stopped with keeping the tweeters in. The Western press's dilemmas disappeared, but also the Bahrain government was working on its dilemma as well, because the Bahrain government's viewpoints appeared in the West. Here's a final method that was tried. The Bahrain government tried to use social media to engage with the criticism, to answer it properly, to rebut things. Well, everyone thought this was a jolly good idea, but the Western press and al-Wafaq were a little suspicious. They didn't think the Bahrain government was really going to do it. This distrust was still here, and it manifested itself in these distrusts down here. So this was an attempt, but it didn't really work as well as we would have liked to get rid of this distrust. Here's another idea, this time one that al-Wafaq had. Perhaps the Bahrain government could organise a commission to investigate discrimination. That would help reduce this trust and the Bahrain government's cooperation dilemma. But when the Bahrain government was offered it, it wasn't really enthusiastic. It decided not to. It wasn't very supportive. And the Saudis agreed with them. So this idea never really got started. Another idea the participants came up with was to encourage investment in the poorer regions. These happen to be the Shia regions. And this would help get more jobs for the Shia. And that would help encourage this trust, help wear out this question mark. Everyone agreed this was a good thing to do. And another thing they thought of was perhaps they could get into social media, and the Bahrain government could use social media to engage with some of the criticism. Well, again, some of the distrust was still there, and the Western press didn't really trust the Bahrain government to be as fair as they thought, as they wanted to be. So this was an attempt, but it wasn't particularly successful. So this was the situation at the end of the symposium. How well did the players do? Well, not too badly, I think. Firstly, the anti-King tweeters were out. Obvious progress, dilemmas eliminated. The Western press was publicising the Bahrain government's point of view much more than it had been. And this had the effect of weakening this problem, because if people could see both sides, this drives us towards moderation. So, by looking at the important dilemmas, especially the ones at the top here, and by working on eliminating those, we got a greater focus, a greater ability to look at what we were really trying to achieve, and probably did better than the Bahrain government's attempts at limiting anti-government stories by shoving people in jail. That just hadn't worked. Are there problems remaining? Yes, there are, but they're smaller problems than the big problems we started off with, and we've got that focus on the important dilemmas. That's these ones at the top, and we're looking at different ways. There's 4 ways of solving this dilemma. There's 6 ways of solving this dilemma. This gives us an ability to think in a different dimension from usual. Often people just try B, and they think again and again of harder and stronger threats, leading to escalation. No, this way, with confrontation analysis, think of the other methods, A, C, D, E, and F. And that will help move us towards de-escalation, towards peace. So back to the confrontation analysis method. Participants, who's involved, relatively easy to do. Positions, what are they saying they want to have happen? Again, relatively easy to do. Threatened future, what will they do if no one budges? Easy to do. But then, from that, we can see dilemmas. And from the dilemmas, we can see strategies. Now, these dilemmas and the strategies are where most negotiations just flounder. These bits are the hard bits, but they're the bits where our program can help. So this is Mike Young for Decision Workshop signing off. I hope you can see how confrontation analysis can help you understand a political problem by expressing it in terms of these ticks, crosses, and question marks, and seeing the dilemmas that follow from it. I hope it can help you plan your next political moves by being able to look at what dilemmas are important and which ones you want to focus on eliminating. So that's the method. That's the power of confrontation analysis.